Good afternoon and welcome to The Black Hole. We have a book launch today, but before that, let me tell you very briefly about The Black Hole. This is a little community space here in Islamabad that we started some months ago, 8-9 months ago. And the aim is to promote science, art, and culture. From time to time, we have book launches as well. Today we have a book that is unusual in a way. It tells you how you should live your life. Men live with women, women live with men. Sometimes they don't get along very well with each other, and sometimes they do. What is the secret of success? How to avoid conflict? How to participate in each other's lives? How to resolve conflicts when they do arise. This is really, as I understood it, the message of this book, A Love Letter to Men and Women by Huma Price. Huma is a barrister, lives most of her time in London. She is from Lahore. She goes back and forth from London to Lahore twice a year or so, and has been doing this for a very long time. She wrote this book, I think, a couple of years ago. And so this is not really a launch in that way. It is an explanation of the book. It's telling us that the book is there and that the book is important. So Huma, tell us, why did you write the book?
I wrote the book because I live in a very interesting place. I live between two cultures. So I'm able to draw on both and the wisdom of both. And there is plenty of wisdom in both Eastern and Western culture that we can draw into our relationships and resolve conflicts. In addition to that, I am a barrister and I specialize in family law. So my experience of my cases was that men and women essentially love each other and they want to be with each other. That's the starting position. A lot of them are not able to resist outside forces that interfere in their relationships, which is why I have put this book, I've put the relationship between men and women, not only on its own, but in the context of the cultures, the history, and the bigger sort of picture that men and women live in. I wrote it so I could share my knowledge and the information that I have. And I've always been an avid reader. I have my own library in London, and I've collected books from Pakistan and India. And I've done a lot of reading. I've been practicing as a barrister for 30-odd years. I have a lot of experience. I'm also very involved in the Pakistani community and Indian community in England. And it seems like a lot of things are developing in the wrong direction. And part of the reason is because people don't understand certain concepts. They misunderstand them. So they move forward in a misinformed sort of way. So in this book, I have tried to explain things in a simple way, explain concepts, for example, concepts such as patriarchy, misogyny, phylogeny, matriarchy. I've tried to explain them in a simple way, and I've tried to put them in a historical and geographical context. Now, I had been researching for this book for at least 10 years. However, as a busy barrister, I never had the time to actually write out the research. And for that, I am indebted to COVID-19, because when the pandemic happened and there was a lockdown, all the courts in London closed, and suddenly I found that I had pretty much nothing to do.
So you mean the justice system in Britain stopped?
It did stop. It had to.
But what would you do with so many cases pending?
Well,
Were they just pushed off?
No, what they did was they started a system of remote hearings. So everybody was safe, but the hearings happened. The police didn't stop their work. The police continued to do their work, but the court stopped for a while. Because my work is quite specialized. It's after they get to a certain stage that I come into the picture. So my work stopped because they didn't get to that point for a very long time.
Okay, I'm sorry I distracted you with this question on COVID. But you've spent a lot of time dealing with family matters, with divorces, with custody of children, and so forth. And in particular, it's with the Indian and Pakistani families over there, couples. Can you tell us of some interesting cases, perhaps, without taking any names?
I've had one or two very interesting cases, but one interesting case I'm going to tell you was an immigration case. I did a lot of asylum cases at one time. I used to practice immigration a long time ago, and then I switched to family after Great Britain more or less finished immigration. And I had one case. It was a Pakistani prostitute who had gone to England. And I think she was called by some rich businessmen over there who often call. And somehow she managed to escape the clutches of the people who had taken her there. And she managed to go to my instructing solicitor. She had an 11-year-old child with her. And she was very keen to prevent her child from going into the profession. So she went to my instructing solicitor. Asylum is very, very difficult. You have to prove a lot of things for asylum. When I met her, I was obviously very moved as a woman, and I'm a mother too. So I was particularly concerned about this 11-year-old child and the fact that she would be going into this profession. So I worked very, very hard for her case. We went to court, we had a very good judge, and I actually managed to win her case, and I managed to get her asylum in the UK. And I was absolutely thrilled.
For the mother as well as the child?
Yes, they would never send the child or the mother back separately. So I managed to get that. But you know what happened? After I had won her case and got her asylum, I heard that she had succumbed to the pressure of the people who had brought her, and she came back to Pakistan.
Oh.
And that was a heartbreaking case for me because I had worked so hard to win it. And that was like, for me, losing a case that I had already won. So that was an interesting case. In terms of my family cases, I can tell you that whether people are Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, the culture is the same. The culture is very much based on gender roles. Man has to do something, woman has to do something. And they have to, and the other thing that's common in all of them is the fact that they have an extended family system. So they all have to exist within an extended family system. Some people may not live with the family, but they still have to put up with the family quite often. So most of them have a lot of interference. Now, there is this common misconception that it's only the boy's family that interferes, but you will be amazed at how many people interfere from the women's side as well. In my particular cases, I find that there is more interference sometimes from the women's cases. So what happens in England, and this is something that I wanted to say on a big forum like this, Asians settled in Britain who have British citizenship, some of them have a lot of arrogance and they feel that they're related to the Queen. When they don't want to get their children married in England, or they can't get their children married in England for whatever reason, they go to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh to get partners for those children. When they go to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and they bring back partners for their children, spouses, the expectation is that that spouse will be forever indebted to them and will live like their slave and will have no needs of their own and can be treated any way they like. And an effort is made to prevent them from finding out about the wider support network that is there in England. So the biggest problems I find in my cases is when one party is from abroad and they've been treated really badly. So a common scenario would be that a British Asian woman's family, and sometimes the woman might have been married before, didn't work out, she might have children. They come here, they'll take a boy back, and then the expectation will be that he will serve the family, and the same for women if they come here and they take a woman back. Expectation is they will serve. Now, if the partner from abroad doesn't serve, then their attitude is, you can go back. You're not going to live in this country. And I have actually dealt with cases where people have brought back the overseas partner to Pakistan or India, left them there, taken their passports. And they've actually done this to a woman who had 2 young children, 2 and 3. They took the children back and they left the mother here. They do some very cruel things in family law. You come across a lot of cruelty.
Well, in your book, you talk about South Asian populations settled in Britain, and you use that same phrase here as well. But is that a case of genuine equivalence or of false equivalence? Because we very often hear about honor killings done by Muslims, but very rarely of honor killings done by other religions. Is that just a bad press, or is that factual?
Well, I think you'd need to ask a social scientist who's done research in honor killing, but I was told reliably by one of my Sikh friends in London that honor killing was quite common in Sikh culture as well. It may not be currently, but at one point it was. I think the attitude generally in Asian culture, or it used to be, that women are expendable. That's, they don't really feature that greatly in the big scheme of things.
Okay, so then we come to patriarchy. This is one of the, actually, let me see, it's your chapter number 1, patriarchy. The dominance of men as historically defined, as historically practiced. What do you have to say about that in this chapter?
Well,
tell us here.
Firstly, I disagree with the word that patriarchy is the dominance of men. I don't agree that it's the dominance of men at all. I think it's the contribution of men that's patriarchy. Now, I believe, despite all my Western education and all the rest, and I retain a lot of wisdom from my Nani, who spoke to me a lot in my childhood about a lot of things. And when I've compared what she told me with what I've learned in the West, her wisdom actually seems more appropriate to me. And whenever I've used her wisdom, I've been more successful in a lot of things. So I feel that there are some things which are natural. And no matter what we do in gender equality, we can't change things that are natural. So the first thing that's natural is that women get pregnant and have babies. Now, we can't get away from that. And I don't even want to go into the scientific debate about, false speculation and all the rest of it. So generally, everywhere in the world, women get pregnant, and when they get pregnant, they usually need the man who's made them pregnant to protect them and provide for them and the young ones when they come. This is a very basic premise of every culture, and I'm sure, and nobody would disagree with that.
It's not a premise, it's a biological fact.
It's a fact, yeah. So that's the basic fact. Now, if we try to go away from that, then we're going away from nature. So my understanding of patriarchy is that it's very much a biology-based phenomenon that exists in all cultures. Now, what happens is, when women are vulnerable, sometimes the male can be dominating, controlling, violent, and all these things, I feel, need to be defined as misogyny. Because patriarchy...
But wait, if I may stop you here. Certainly, there are a lot of things that are biologically defined. So is aggression, territoriality. These are all things that we get from our animal nature. And yet we are able to fight against that and make ourselves into something better. That better is humans. So are we to accept patriarchy as a fact of life, a fact of nature, or is it something to be struggled against?
Well, misogyny is definitely something to be struggled against.
But not patriarchy.
But not when men protect and provide for women, there's nothing to struggle against. But when they take that as far as misogyny and start hitting women, not providing for them, then we need to struggle against that. But we need to define these separately. They're not the same thing.
But Huma, I think the man as provider and the woman as receiver is something that a lot of feminists would disagree with you on. So, are you in conflict with feminism in this book?
Well, I've actually defined feminism as well.
Okay, good. Let's have a definition of that.
For me, feminism is equal opportunities in education, employment, and political matters. That's feminism. Feminism is not swearing, smoking, wearing particular types of clothes, which is what it becomes associated with in the media in some cases. So patriarchy is not actually against the education, employment, and political rights for women. Patriarchy is a very simple starting point. Now, as a father, I'm sure there are many men sitting here who've paid for their daughters to get educated and provided for that.
And I'm sure there'd be women who would pay for their daughters as well.
And maybe their wives have also worked alongside. I mean, my husband and I worked, and we paid for our daughter in private schools throughout. We both worked, but when I was pregnant and whilst she was young, I stayed at home and I didn't work. But you see, my problem with feminism is that it devalues homemakers, women who want to stay at home and be mothers. It devalues them because everything is valued in terms of your income potential and money. And other type of contribution is not valued in the same way. Maybe that's the market economy we live in. And I think I've quoted Tagore, who has said that men and women have an equal role. What has happened over the years is that the one who earns the money has become more powerful because of the way economic systems are. So I'll give you an example of my Nani and Dadi. Now, my Nani and Dadi never went out to work, but they were very powerful women. No decision was made in the family without their consultation. They were valued. Their wisdom was valued. Although they didn't contribute to the family budget. But I feel that these little definitions of confusing patriarchy with dominance, confusing feminism with only a woman who earns money is making a contribution in a family system. These are the definitions we need to be more clear about.
But wait, maybe your dadi and nani were exceptionally powerful, strong women, and there are strong individuals within any population. Does this take away from the fact that 90% or 95% of decisions are taken by men and men alone in Indian and Pakistani families?
I respectfully disagree with you. I think in Indian and Pakistani families, men consult their wives and they consult the wider family, and more importantly, they would consult their mothers. They'd consult their parents before they take decisions. I have never seen an Asian man taking a decision on his own. He would consult lots of people before he takes a decision. So this attitude that men take the decision and the wives left out is actually not true. If we do research on this, it's not true, in my opinion.
Okay, we'll leave it as a research question then. Okay. Let's go on to matriarchy. I haven't seen many examples of that. I've heard that there are matriarchal societies in Assam, India, in Africa, here, there, whatever. Other people over here might know about that better. But it's very rare. And one can understand that because we come from our biological roots are those of cavemen and cave women. And of course, the caveman was stronger. He could go hunt and kill more animals and do better physical work. Okay, so we understand that men had the bigger role in those societies. But as society has moved on, as we see that women can do as much work and work that is just as good when it comes to non-physical work. I mean, in this age where this thing matters.
Absolutely.
Then, do you see our societies becoming as much matriarchal as patriarchal?
Pervez, with a lot of respect, all societies have a certain amount of matriarchy. I don't know whether you're aware, but in England, I can tell you 1/3 of the population is being brought up by single mothers. I myself was brought up by a single mother since I was 10 years old, because my father abandoned us and went off. So my mother raised me, and she wasn't even educated. She worked in factories to raise me. So I was raised in a matriarchy. And I see a lot of other people who are also raised in matriarchal families. So I don't think it's something we're waiting for. I think it's already happened. And when it comes to it, women can do just as good a job as men can. And I don't think anything I'm saying is actually devaluing women or taking away from the fact that they're as intellectual as men. In England, you see, unfortunately, I do live in England, and I have been quite influenced by the society that I live in. In England, the men that I have grown up with, which is mostly white men, they see women as intellectually equal, financially equal, equal in every way except in strength. So they are very, very patriarchal. They protect women. They provide for women wherever they can. They'll open doors. But they respect women as equals. There is absolutely no putting down women as, she's a woman. There's none of that.
Of course, this is a recent development.
It is, of course it's a recent development.
It's barely 100 years old.
I agree.
When did women get the right to vote in England?
Only in the last century. Women didn't even have property rights in England until the last century. But you see, England is one of those countries that's made a lot of progress over a 100-year period, mainly due to the Industrial Revolution, and now we have the digital revolution as well. So in the early 20th century, the suffragettes were out there asking. But you see, the Western feminism is slightly different. I find that feminism in the East, and it's possibly because women have suffered a lot more than women did in the West in terms of physical abuse and violence, because once I was writing a case on asylum, and I was reading a report. I think it was an Indian report, and it said that 87% of women in India believed that if their husband gave them a little slap, it was nothing out of the ordinary. This is all part of life. They saw their fathers give a little slap to their mothers, and they didn't think there was anything to protest against. So as soon as women started feeling that is something to protest against, they became very, very radical. And Western women have also gone through this. You see, initially, when women realize, it's like a little spring, you keep it down, it comes out like this. But now they've gone beyond that. They've gone beyond that radical feminism. And now there's a lot more harmony. When I look at my daughter's generation, all the girls and boys have gone to university, they've all got degrees, they've all gone for professions, they're all equal, and yet there is a lot of harmony. There is that isn't there anymore, the whole talk about equality, because the young men don't treat the women any differently because of their gender to how they treat men, but they're still very protective.
It's considered to be a desirable goal, and it is one that does not contradict any religious belief of theirs. But in certain situations, you do have religious beliefs which say the woman is inferior. The woman can be beaten, maybe not too hard, lightly. In that case, it's a lot more difficult. So I'd say that women in Pakistan have much greater challenges to face. Would you agree?
I think so. I think Pakistani society, like I said earlier, has regressed, unfortunately. Women were more powerful when it first started. They had a bigger role to play in society. But over the years, and I don't really want to go into the political, religious discussion because I don't know enough about it to talk in an informed way. But it seems to me that it has regressed when it comes to women.
Well, it depends what you compare against. So if you were to look at, let's say, 150 years ago. Earlier, the vast majority of Muslim women, urban Muslim women were in parda, burqa. And you did not have Muslim reformers, even those who fought for education, like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. They said nothing about having women educated. So Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he was remarkable in that he was able to stand up against various religious dogmas. He was insistent on Muslims learning English, science, whatever. But he said not a single word about women. In fact, he said women, they should not be educated. And similarly, Allama Iqbal, he was also very insistent that don't follow these Western women, because then you will enter into moral decline. And Allama Iqbal is, he is our, there can't be anyone greater than him.
I know you.
Akbar Allahabad.
I know you say that. It's interesting that you say that. First of all, I have to confess that I don't know enough about Islamic history and the position. I live in England. I've written the book very much from the perspective that I live within a very mixed community. So I don't know so much about Muslim history. I haven't been educated in that, so I can't comment on that. But you say all this, but Fatma Jinnah qualified as a dentist in 1905 and ran her own dental surgery for 7 years before she gave up the surgery to be with Jinnah. And I've quoted her, and I've also quoted the Nawab Begums of Bhopal in my book. So this whole thing about women not being empowered, I found lots of Muslim women. And the Nawab Begums ruled for 4 generations. Women ruled for 4 generations. The first one was only 23 years old. So there is history where Muslim women have ruled.
I think pointing to Fatma Jinnah is perhaps not very representative. Her brother was also not very representative of general Muslim culture in terms of what he ate, drank, and how he dressed. So I think that equivalence is not established by such examples.
But Pervez, I think what we tend to forget is that it wasn't just women who were being kept away from education, even the men were being kept away from education. You have to reach a certain point in society before you can start defining them in gender terms. I think the societies you're talking about need to reach a particular level in terms of having the basics in society before you can then start talking about more refined rights. That's why I try not to talk about societies I don't have that much information about. I can only talk about the research that I've done, which is in contradiction to some of the things that I've heard.
This is an important issue that you bring up. What are rights? Well, now, rights are differently understood in different cultures, and they are very much in contradiction with each other at times. There is now a universally accepted, a universally defined, maybe not accepted, version of what is considered right, ethical behavior, and that's in the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, well, UNHDR. Yes.
Yeah.
But it often runs into opposition, in contradiction with various religious beliefs. But let's let that
But can I just say something? Yeah. You talk about rights. Now, what I would like to say about rights is that a lot of people who fight for rights tend to forget that every right has a responsibility attached to it. You can't just take the rights and not fulfill the responsibility. And again, coming back to women, there are a lot of women who fought for their right for education, for employment, and for income. The same women, if they go somewhere with a man, they will never offer to pay the bill because they don't feel it's their responsibility to pay the bill. The man has to pay the bill. So they want the right to be educated. They don't want the responsibility of actually spending the money that they earn. So when we talk about rights, we must remember that each right has a responsibility attached to it. And rights are very, I don't think you need a PhD
but hang on. There are, I can give you an example of a right to which there is no responsibility added to it.
Such as?
What we see in Iran. They say, the women protesting there are saying, we have the right to be bareheaded. That doesn't involve any responsibility.
No, it's not always you who has the responsibility. Sometimes somebody else has the responsibility. So
Well,
somebody
what's the responsibility
The responsibility would be to actually find the correct definition. If women are saying we don't have a responsibility or we don't have the duty to do something, then somebody else has the right to define what they're supposed to do.
The women of Iran at the moment are saying just one thing, that don't force us into hijab. They're not promising anything in return. They're not saying that we will act responsibly if you allow us to do this. They're saying this is simply our basic right to be able to show our faces, to be able to show our hair. So
somebody has a responsibility to find out where it says in religion that they must cover their head and find out the exact definition, because you've just talked about some religions say that you can beat a woman, but I have heard interpretations which say that that is incorrect. It doesn't say anywhere that you can beat a woman, and this is all incorrect interpretation, deliberate. But Pervez, can I respectfully say to you, I'm not a political scientist. I'm a barrister. I deal with facts. I have tried to talk about gender issues using facts, using research. When it comes to political issues relating to women, I live in England, and if we want to protest, we can go out and protest. We can usually go and see our local MP, we can form a pressure group, and then we can change it to whatever we want it to be. We can negotiate that change. I can't really comment on societies that are not open. I don't have any experience of them. I don't have enough knowledge to be able to even answer that question about Iran. I've never lived in Iran. I don't really know what's going on there. I've heard about it. I heard a woman was killed. And after that, there have been these protests, and apparently hundreds have died since then. Maybe it's another revolution in Iran, I don't know. But I can't really answer the questions that you're asking me about rights in a political way. I can only talk about them in a legal way. In England, there was a point in time, you talk about women, but there was a point in time when children didn't have any rights. So teachers and parents could cane the children. They could hit them. A pressure group started to protect children, children's rights. After that, hitting children became illegal because they canvassed the politicians. They said, this is wrong, that is wrong. They passed all these children acts. After that, now, if a teacher hits a child, they're usually dismissed from their post as teacher. If a parent hits a child in England, do you know they lose their child to social services and the child is put in care? It's the child's right. So I can talk legally about the kind of rights that are protected and that people... But you see, in a society like Western society, which is very open, you can do all of this. You can do things in a very legal way. You can form a pressure group. You can then go and have a dialogue with politicians. You can say what you want. They can tell you what they're willing to. But one of the problems we have in England is that the Asian community generally doesn't engage with consultations when they go on. But in the end, afterwards they complain, this happened, that happened. But when it's happening, they wouldn't. So, for example, when children are taken into care by local authorities, parents are shocked because the attitude is, these are our children, we can do what we like to them. And once they realize that this is a society where children have rights, it's a complete shock, and then they have to be educated. And also, there are a lot of courses for violent men, because in the cases that I do, if a man has been violent to a woman, if there's been domestic violence, he loses the right to see his children until he's done a course called the DAP, D-A-P-P, Domestic Abuse Perpetrators Program. And men are actually taken through that course. It's a 6-month, fully attended course. After that, they're able to challenge themselves and answer questions about their own behavior, which is then changed through education. And you see, the beauty in England is they change people's attitudes through the laws. They educate people through the laws. For example, I remember when I was a student in the 70s and 80s, nobody bothered about drinking and driving. Everybody used to drink and drive, and there were lots of accidents, lots of people were killed. In the 80s, there was this move towards drink-drive laws. So there was a new right for people to be safe on the roads. Once these laws were passed, and once, of course, in England, when a law is passed, it applies equally to the Prime Minister as it does to the ordinary public. And so these laws were passed, people were stopped on the roads, they were breathalyzed. If there was more than a particular unit of alcohol, they lost their license, they had to go to court. And very gradually, the whole attitude changed in Western society. So people no longer drink and drive. They book taxis, or if there's a husband and a wife, the husband would drink and the wife would drive, she wouldn't drink. And they're very, very responsible about this. It's drink responsibly. And that has been changed within a span of about 25 to 30 years. And I witnessed it myself. I was an adult when this whole thing started. And in the same way, they're now changing attitudes to violence towards women. Firstly, they changed the rape laws, because at one time, when there was a rape case, the woman who was raped would be cross-examined vigorously and taken apart. Now they've got these new laws that victims of rape cannot be questioned in court.
So I see you've commented on Me Too as well.
I have commented on Me Too, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, Me Too is a movement that started, it was started by a woman in America. Like I said, I've forgotten a lot of the things, I've forgotten her name now. But she started this, and because we have social media now, and because it's so easy to share information and share experiences, within a very short space of time, millions of women across the world had come forward, and they had talked about their particular experiences. And
what is your feeling? Are they grounded in reality mostly, or are there plenty of spurious claims as well?
I think on the whole, they're grounded in reality. One of the problems we have is that women are generally socialized to be passive and submissive in some cultures. The problem with that is when you don't make your children, don't give them the tools, the skills to deal with something they don't want to do, to protest, then what happens is they're not only passive towards you as parents or you as a family, they're passive towards everybody who wants to take advantage of them. So there are a lot of women who don't have the skills to resist a man because they're so used to being passive. They feel like this is a man has the authority, he can do, so they don't resist. That's one problem. I do have a problem with a lot of very famous actresses who claimed in Me Too, because to me, they should not have done that, because they benefited from whatever they did. They became millionairesses, they became famous. So to me, that was a contract between them and the man. The man said, sleep with me, I'll give you this role. The man gave the role. It's very much contract, consideration, payment. So if they had acquiesced, if they had agreed to whatever the deal was, then they can't go back later and say, the deal I made with you, it was made under duress, you shouldn't have made me that. They had a choice, and they made that decision. But it's the vulnerable women, the ones who are not famous, who are not rich, who want to do a job somewhere peacefully, who are harassed. But in England, we have a lot of protection.
So you would agree that the Me Too movement is a way forward for women?
Yeah, I think the social
and it's where women can actually exercise where they can assert that they have been damaged, and they can do that without feeling as if they will become pariahs in society. Here, of course, a woman is very afraid to go to the police, because if she claims rape, then the horrific ordeal that she has to go through. And I'm afraid it's not becoming easier with time over here.
No,
from what I
let me tell you something very interesting about Pakistani women. In England, there is a special asylum category for Pakistani women, because they found, and they did a lot of research, and there are a lot of cases in this, they found that Pakistanis can claim asylum on the basis of their religious belief, political belief, sexual orientation, and Pakistani women can claim asylum because firstly, they're not protected in society, and secondly, the authorities that should protect them don't protect them. And so they can claim asylum if they can show that they have a threat from anybody in Pakistan at all. It was the case of Shah and Islam, a very famous case. And on the basis of that, a lot of Pakistani women claimed asylum successfully. And the case that I was talking about, I also relied
That
on
their
the case
lives are under threat if they remain in Pakistan, and
Yes.
so therefore they should be granted asylum
Yes,
there. Okay.
yes. Just being a Pakistani woman is enough. She doesn't have to have political, religious, or other beliefs as well. So this is the view in the West, that Pakistani women are vulnerable. And if they claim asylum, then they have a reason. But of course, then there were a lot of bogus asylums as well.
Oh,
Everything is
I'm
open
afraid
to
that,
interpretation.
we're rather infamous for that.
And then also you just talked about the Me Too movement, and you said, is that a space for women? I think what we actually need to do is learn from things like that and change society. We have a responsibility to change the way we socialize our women into becoming so passive submissive. We have to change that whole attitude from the home, so it never gets to the place where they go out and they can't resist all these things that happen to them.
Well, here I'd say it's not just the home that makes women passive, it's also done by decree in terms of how they must dress and how they must behave. And these are explicit orders given to vice chancellors of universities that they must have dress codes. And this comes from the state itself. So
Well,
passivity is something considered very desirable by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
I think if you talk about Pakistan, then I'd say there are bigger problems in Pakistan than just women's
Oh, I'm
dress.
not
There are very
doubting
big
that there are
problems.
bigger problems, but passivity is something that is considered a very positive attribute.
But I think Pakistan actually needs to move forward in a lot of ways before these things can be addressed properly in the way that they should be addressed. I don't think it's possible to talk about that in the current environment where there's a lot of change going on. So again, you're taking the discussion to a very political point of view. And as I said to you, I don't know enough about Pakistani politics. I mean, famous politicians walk past me. I don't even know who they are because I've lived in England since I was a child.
So I would say that we should regard your book as a manual for how to live life if you're in Britain or in elsewhere in Europe,
Well, I've
where,
tried to
where
make
you
it.
have legal recourse, where if a woman is brutalized, she can go to the police and say, this is what happened to me. No woman dares to go to the police in Pakistan. She
Well-
knows what will happen.
Well, the thing is that I have got a chapter called Crimes in the book. And what is amazing is that both India and Pakistan, they have exactly the same laws as England in the books, because India and Pakistan are very much based on the English legal system. So all the protection is there for women and for children in India and Pakistan in legislation. It's all there. What you really need to do is to have rule of law, which is why the laws are not being enforced here in the way that they're being enforced in the West, because in the West we have rule of law. We change everything through the rule of law. We're all answerable to the rule of law. That is the difference.
I think it's not quite true. Of course, you're absolutely right that the rule of law is rigorously held to in Britain, the rest of the world. But here the law is also at fault, deeply at fault. For example, the DNA test for rape has been decreed to be inadmissible by the Islamic Ideology Council. They say no, there have to be 4 witnesses.
Well, I must really say here that my book is not solely about Pakistan. It's very much about the South Asian community settled abroad and settled in their home countries. It's really more about individuals to look at how they can change their attitude and how they can improve, because I feel all of us, me included, can continue to improve ourselves as people. And we can continue to question ourselves and our own attitudes. And one of the things that I've talked about in personal relationships in my books is the necessity to forgive, for example. A lot of us hold resentment, and it hurts us. So in relationships, if we could just learn to forgive a little, relationships may not end. And a lot of us are self-righteous, and we say, no, they never said sorry, so why should we forgive? But the most important time to forgive is when the other person doesn't say sorry, doesn't want to change. You really have to forgive. And a lot of people think forgiving means going back to the same place. I think you should forgive, forget, and move on. But holding resentment and staying in a relationship is much worse than forgiving and moving on. So this is really more about interpersonal skills rather than the political situations that I've addressed in the book.
Let me refine what I said earlier, whether it's about Britain, or whether this is a manual that is good for Britain or elsewhere. It's really for anywhere where people think in a modern way, not in a pre-modern way.
Well, obviously they have to be able to read English.
No,
so because the book is
that's
only available
not what
in
I mean.
English.
Modernity is a frame of mind. It's that in which you accept reason, rationality, equality of human beings. Now, you cannot possibly have this of any worth in a society where you don't believe in the equality of man and woman. You have to believe in that before everything else.
But you see, I have
And
a
now
problem.
here is the problem, we don't.
I think the problem is partly that we use the word equality rather than equal opportunities. You see, equality, do you really think men and women are equal in physical terms? Usually men tend to be taller.
No.
They're not equal, are they? No. They may not be equal in intellect. A woman might be more intellectual than the man she's with. So what is equality? How would you define equality?
Equality of opportunity,
That's
certainly,
yes.
certainly. But opportunity means what? It doesn't mean just, it certainly does mean equality in terms of jobs, in terms of access to education, in terms of being able to sit where you want in a bus, for example. And if a male can show his hair, why cannot a woman show her hair? We want equality in that as well. So equality then has a very diverse set of meanings to it. Wherever one accepts equality in the sense that I am talking about, there you have a modern culture. Modernity doesn't come from wearing clothes designed in Paris.
Talking about Paris,
Okay.
Do you know in Paris there was a demonstration because the French wanted no religious significance in people's clothing and they wanted women to take their hijab off. In protest against the authorities in France, do you know that a whole load of English women went to work with hijabs on, saying that if a woman wants to wear hijab, she should have the right to wear hijab. So what about women who choose to wear hijab? Why are we enforcing upon them that they shouldn't wear hijab? The view is, my view is, every woman should be free to dress the way she wants, whether she wants to wear a miniskirt or whether she wants to wear full parda and she wants to wear a full hijab. She should be free to do so without any interference from the authorities. We resist interference from authorities in any way whatsoever.
I would endorse that.
And so that is equality. All women are equal if they can dress the way they choose, without any interference from men, without any interference from families, and particularly without interference from authorities.
But that's exactly what I mean. That's a modern mind. It's something that comes with the Enlightenment. It doesn't come from any religion. It doesn't come from any other culture. It comes from the European Enlightenment. And tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, don't think I'd ever dare to tell you that you're wrong. I'd probably get a fatwa against me from all your fans.
Okay,
So
look,
I'll pass on that one, Pervez, I think.
I think we've taken up quite a bit of time, so we'll let the audience now ask you questions.
I think first of all we would like to welcome Huma Price to Pakistan.
Thank you so
And
much.
you know, I have not been able to go through her book, what it is all about, but the way she briefly introduced us. But one thing I can definitely tell, that women in Pakistan especially would love to have her here more often to listen to what she's saying. Because yeah, you're right, we are faced with a lot of difficulties in terms of even being educated, even being liberated, as we say it. We still have a lot of restrictions at home, by the family, by the larger society, especially right now in Pakistan. The way the situation of security is for women, that you are really scared of getting out in the evening, even for a simple thing like a walk. So this is a very welcome, I think, addition. I would love to have an opportunity to go through her book as well. But I was also thinking that maybe she should have, me being anthropologist and working on women and gender for many, many years and teaching in universities, I really feel some universities, good gender department or women department could have been a great place for her, where there will be a lot of women to appreciate her work as well as, benefit from her work. So my really suggestion to her is, on your next visit, or maybe in this visit if there is time, she should definitely consider opening this kind of debate in a women's department in a Pakistani university.
Well, if you arrange it, I'd be very happy to come along.
Well, I can
because
talk
I'm
to-
a foreigner, more or less, in Pakistan. I don't have the connections here.
But I
to
could see
organize
that she has so much to offer to the departments where she really belongs. Even though she has a legal background, and I'm more anthropologist, and there are many women's studies department, gender department, they would love to hear to her, I guess, in terms of what she's talking about women, and how at some point women should be given some liberation in terms of how they want their life to be, not the way the families want, or the country want, or the religion want, or those kind of pressures. They would really like to listen to her, I guess.
Yes, I actually believe that if women want to go to work, they should have the right to, and if they want to stay at home, they should have the right to. And that shouldn't be trivialized at all.
Exactly.
When I had my daughter, I stayed at home for 10 years. And that was something that I felt I wanted to do. I wanted to be with her. And if I hadn't done that, I probably would be a QC or a judge in England now. So people say to me, oh, you made a very big sacrifice. And I say it was not a sacrifice at all. Because had I not done that, she would not be the happy, bubbly person that she is today. I just feel women should have a choice in what they want to do, and we shouldn't have definitions for what is a successful woman.
Yes, exactly. This is why I'm saying women would love to hear you, in these kind of departments, and they will be very interested in making a debate, because these things, I really feel honest, is a very wide topics. These are what we are talking about. Women is just not one thing, it is also caste specific, class specific, especially in South Asian region. So we would really like this kind of a lively debate. Me being anthropologist and working on women and gender, I would love to have such a speaker sometimes, in universities where our students could also benefit from that. They would love it, that somebody talks about their rights and their liberation.
There is a Department of Gender Studies at Quaid-e-Azam University, and I'm sure they would be interested in that. Yes.
Yeah. Allama Iqbal Open University also has it. So, yeah, I don't know how much time she has at her, right now, but maybe some in some future trips. We would really like to coordinate and invite her for some lectures like this. Because I feel that women would love to hear from her, what she's done. And, that is the major contribution, if you address the right audience who would be interested in these kind of topics.
Well, I'd be very happy if you want to organize with me. I come to Pakistan very often, and if there were a few lectures organized, I'd come for a week or something.
Sure.
It's no problem.
Huma, I was very happy that you've taken the South Asian community as a unit. That's really very nice, I think. But in reality, do you think that the South Asians in London, if that is where you are based, they relate to each other, or they have more empathy to each other, or they're there together to even acknowledge or the problems that go across the community, as you say, that they are very similar cultures. Are they addressing them?
Okay, I think what people living in India or Pakistan perhaps don't realize about the South Asians living in England is that when mainstream society is white, everybody who is not white is one community. So South Asians identify with each other, and some of them identify with the African community, as we are called people of color. So a lot of the issues are the same, a lot of the problems are the same, but that enmity isn't there in England that exists in India and Pakistan. And I'll tell you, it's a very simple reason. Any society that is financially okay doesn't have those type of problems. In England, everybody has roti kapra makan. Everybody has free education for their children. They all have the National Health Service, which is free. So nobody is desperate. Nobody is starving. So because of that reason, people are able to live with each other in a very calm environment. And Indians and Pakistanis actually have more in common than they have not in common with each other. I think there's been a political movement to divide them in India and Pakistan on both sides. But in England, I'm happy to tell you that when I grew up, I had friends who were Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, from all over the world. I grew up in a very, very mixed community in England, and we all relate to each other as people of color. That we are a minority in England. So there are some people who are now trying to divide the community, but they're not local people. People have been sent from abroad to divide the community, and we had a lot of problem in Leicester recently, and they were identified because, you see, in England we have an effective rule of law. So these things are picked up very quickly. We have cameras everywhere. So whole buses were taken into certain areas where there were a lot of Indians and Pakistanis to create trouble. And the problem is, human beings are generally quite simple. And if somebody tells them a message strongly enough, they start to follow it. You know what happened in Germany? They actually did a controlled experiment, and Pervez might know more about this than I do, in Germany after everything had happened. And they found that if the circumstances were the same, it could happen again. You know, Nazi Germany could happen again. Because it's certain things that trigger it. And if those triggers are present in any society, it can happen again. And we see it happening now in certain parts of the world. And we've seen communities fall apart because of this. You know, Bosnia and other places where there was ethnic cleansing. So I feel that if societies are prospering financially, it is less likely that they'll be fighting over race, religion, and so on. It's when they're not prospering. Finances have a lot to do with how peacefully people live with each other. And the more poverty we have in the world, the more division we'll have. The more we'll have political leaders leading these people astray. Because essentially, human beings want to be able to feed their children. And if they can't feed their children, they become desperate, and they'll do anything for the kind of money to be able to feed their children. One of the things I've tried to show through my book is that we really need to start understanding other people rather than judging them and labeling them. So as human beings, we need to understand each other. As men and women, we need to understand each other, and we need to stop labeling. That's one of the most important things, because we've become a very label-oriented community. Everybody is something, you know. This is a Muslim, this is a Hindu, this is, you know, a chauvinist, this is a feminist. And they've become, and I understand that in Pakistan the word liberal's been labeled in a particular way, which is not how it's meant to be. The definition of liberal is very different from the way it is understood in Pakistan, at least in England. But I do apologize for my ignorance.
There's a long story on that, but we'll...
Thank you.
Thank you very much. पहले तो आपने जो दो बातें कही उनको मैं रिलेट कर सकता था. आई वॉज़ वेरी हैप्पी और मुझे बड़ा अच्छा भी लगा. एक तो जो आपने कहा कि इन साउथ एशियन सोसाइटीज़ मेजॉरिटी ऑफ फैमिलीज़ के अंदर जो ख़वातीन हैं उनके बगैर डिसीजन नहीं लिए जाते. ये मैंने होते देखा, जिस तरह आपने अपनी नानी और दादी की एग्जांपल दी. मैंने अपने घर में देखा है کہ میری والدہ جو ہیں شی واز آلویز ویری ڈسائسو کہ کوئی جو ڈیسیجن فیملی کا لینا ہوتا تھا. سیکنڈلی جو آپ نے یہ فنومینا بتایا کہ جو پاکستانی فیملیز جو ہیں ان کی جو میرجز ہو رہی ہیں ایسے ایز اے لائر، میں ایک لائر ہوں اور فیملی لاء میں کام کرتا ہوں، بہت سارے میٹرز کو میں نے دیکھا ہے. تو یہ میں نے آپ کی انفارمیشن کو ریلیٹ کیا جو اچھا لگا. لاسٹ میرا کویشچن یہ ہے کہ لو لیٹر ٹو مین اینڈ وومن کو اگر آپ 1 2 3 لائنس کے اندر ایکسپلین کریں ہمارے لیے، وہ لوگ جنہوں نے نہیں پڑھی، کہ یہ کس چیز کو ڈسکرائب کر رہی ہے. آف کورس مین اور وومن کے جو ریلیشن شپ ہے اس کو کر رہی ہے، تو آپ نے جو سمری جو ہے یا جو مین اس کا فوکل پوائنٹ ہے وہ کیا ہے؟
اس کا فوکل پوائنٹ میں یہ کہوں گی کہ سب سے پہلے تو ہمیں اپنی ڈیفینسونیس کو جو ہے نا ایک ڈراپ کر دینا چاہیے. جو ہم ہر وقت ڈیفینسو رہتے ہیں نا کہ مجھے اٹیک کر رہے ہیں، مجھے اٹیک کر رہے ہیں، کوئی کچھ کہے تو سننا چاہیے کہ کیا کہہ رہا ہے. ڈز اٹ ایکچولی اماؤنٹ ٹو اینی تھنگ. ہمیں فوراً ڈیفینسو اور پروٹیکٹیو نہیں ہونا چاہیے. ہمیں ڈرنا نہیں چاہیے دوسرے سے، ہمیں انڈرسٹینڈ کرنا چاہیے. میرا یہ ماننا ہے کہ مین اینڈ ویمن essentially love each other. And I believe that men in particular love women a lot کیونکہ ان کی پرورش ایک عورت کی گود میں ہوئی ہوتی ہے، تو ان کا ایک عورتوں سے وہ بہت ان کا ویسا رشتہ ہوتا ہے. لیکن سوسائٹی جو ہے وہ انہیں اس رشتے سے دور کر دیتی ہے. جو ایموشنز مردوں میں اور عورتوں میں دونوں میں موجود ہوتے ہیں سوسائٹی انہیں دور کر دیتی ہے. اور میں نے اپنی کتاب میں اس کا ذکر کیا ہے. ہمیں لڑکے اور لڑکیوں کی ایک جیسی پرورش کرنی چاہیے. ہمیں انہیں یہ نہیں کہنا چاہیے، جیسے مثال کے طور پہ لڑکا اگر روتا ہے تو اس سے کہتے ہیں ڈونٹ کرائی یو ناٹ اے گرل، بٹ اے مین آلسو ہیز ایموشنز، وائی شوڈنٹ ہی کرائی؟ وائی ڈو وی لیبل ہم ایز ناٹ manly, not mature because he's crying? So we have to allow our children to be whatever they are and to grow up. And if both grow up in touch with their emotions, then they are more likely to have better relationships. See? کبھی کبھی ایسا ہوتا ہے ہماری ریلیشن شپس خراب اس لیے ہوتی ہیں we're not really in touch with our own selves. ہم اپنے آپ سے بڑے دور ہوئے ہوتے ہیں. تو میرا میسیج یہ ہے کہ مرد اور عورتیں ایک دوسرے سے پیار کرتے ہیں اور ہمیں ڈسکور کرنے چاہیے وہ طریقے جن سے کہ ہم آگے پیار محبت سے رہ سکیں. ہمیں اپنے بچوں کی، اس کتاب میں ایک پورا چیپٹر بچوں کے اوپر ہے، اور کیونکہ میں ویسٹ میں رہتی ہوں اور مجھے یہ احساس تھا کہ مجھے لیبل دے دیا جائے گا کہ یہ تو ویسٹرن لبرل وریور ہے. میرا جو بچوں کا چیپٹر ہے اسے میں نے پورا خلیل جبران کی ایک نظم پہ بیس کیا ہے. بچوں کی جو پوری فلسفی ہے نا بچوں کی پرورش کی، وہ خلیل جبران کی ایک نظم ہے جو شروع ہوتی ہے. اس کی کتاب ہے دا پروفٹ، اس میں ایک نظم ہے یور چلڈرن آر ناٹ یور چلڈرن. اگر آپ اس نظم کو سمجھ لیں تو میں دعوے سے کہتی ہوں کہ آپ کے بچوں کی پرورش آپ بہت اچھی کر سکتے ہیں اگر آپ اس نظم کو سمجھ لیں. لیکن اس کے لیے بڑا جگر چاہیے. یہ سمجھ لینا کہ آپ کے بچے جو ہیں دے belong to a different age. You cannot enforce your own values on them. You have to understand. اور یہی خلیل جبران کی نظم یہ کہتی ہے آپ سے. تو مردوں اور عورتوں کو جب آپ کو ایک چیز میں آپ کو اور بتاتی ہوں، میں نے ایک اور چیز آبزرو کی ہے سوسائٹی میں، اور وہ یہ ہے کہ ہم انسان جب ہمیں غصہ آتا ہے تو ہم بھڑ برا بھلا کہتے ہیں، گالیاں بھی دیتے ہیں، مار بھی دیتے ہیں کبھی کبھی. لیکن اگر ہمیں کسی پہ پیار آتا ہے تو ہم بڑے شرما کے رہ جاتے ہیں اور ہم پیار کا اظہار نہیں کر سکتے. غصے کا اظہار تو ہم فٹافٹ کر دیتے ہیں. پیار کا اظہار کرتے ہوئے ہمیں تو نہیں پتہ نہیں کیا سوچے گا، مجھے بڑا کمزور سوچے گا، یہ سوچے گی. پیار کا اظہار نہیں، ہمیں پیار کا اظہار
فلموں میں تو ہو جاتا ہے.
ہاں
فلموں میں ہو جاتا ہے.
فلموں میں ہو جاتا ہے. ریئل لائف میں آئی لو یو، آپ لوگوں میں سے جتنے میرڈ ہیں آپ نے لاسٹ ٹائم اپنی بیوی سے کب کہا تھا؟ پرویز آپ نے سعدیہ سے کب کہا تھا آئی لو یو؟
یہ دیکھیں
The last time you said I love you. Well, because this is a society where people are generally married. جی نہیں میری don't misunderstand the book. I talk about love for parents, I talk about love for friends, I even talk about love for animals and even love for the environment. I feel human beings are made of love. They are made of love. We just don't get in touch with it. हम गुस्से से in touch रहते हैं, मोहब्बत से in touch नहीं रहते.
Can I ask you a difficult question?
No, you've asked me too many difficult questions already. This is the audience's time. I'm not giving you another chance because you've made it too political, and you know I'm not a political
बिल्कुल
animal.
नहीं. It's
अच्छा.
it's social.
ठीक है, I can tell you I said I love you to my husband this morning on message.
Yeah, but it's on what is now accepted in the West. Same-sex marriages.
Yes.
What is your position on that?
My position on that is that we have to allow people to be whatever they want to be and keep these things in the private sphere. You know, when I take a case for my client, I couldn't care less who they make love to. It's not my business. I don't care. All I want to know is what is their legal position? Have they got the documents for me to win my case? Now, I am not going to decide whether I take a case or not on the basis of someone's sexuality. I've done cases for homosexual men and lesbian women and people in same-sex marriages and so on. You know, we have to start respecting people's personal life. We have to stop judging them. And even if you are religious and very religious, you have to understand God will judge, not you. God has not put you on this earth to judge other people. You only have to look at yourself. You know, jihad is apne nafs se ladai karna. That's what it is, not dusron se ladai karna. You have to understand, we don't teach, we don't educate.
Excellent. You've answered my question and you've reinforced my earlier statement that this is for a modern society. Try doing the same, try advocating the same here, and the consequences will be immediate.
Well, there's so much homosexuality in Pakistan. 30% of parts of Pakistan are homosexual. So what are you...
Of course.
You see,
but try,
reality is there.
But say that this is the way it is, this is the way, well, it is, so let's accommodate it, let's give it...
Can I just sort of rephrase what I've said? You know, same-sex marriages, you don't have to agree with them. I may not agree with them, you know, at a deeper level. I may not agree that it's natural. I may not agree with them. But that's my personal view. Why should that affect somebody else's life?
That is
Whatever our personal view is about anybody, we should keep that to ourselves and relate to them in whatever civil way we need to relate to them. So what we tend to do, I find that what very politicized people tend to do is they say, no, you must accept same-sex marriage as natural, and unless you do that, you cannot move in society. I can tell you in England, I live with the English, a lot of them are very Christian. They're very Christian. But they have learned to keep their personal beliefs in the private sphere and do what is necessary for a peaceful society in the public sphere. So a lot of people who've passed this law don't agree with same-sex marriage. They would be horrified if their son or daughter wanted to go in a same-sex marriage. They would be horrified, just like a lot of people here would be. But what they've done is they've said, our beliefs are for us, we're not going to do this, but if other people want to do this, we want to create an equal society where they can do whatever they want to do, and we will make sure nobody discriminates against them.
So isn't that the definition of secularism?
Oh God, I don't want to get into secularism with you.
It is
Pervez.
exactly that.
Well, it is secularism is
Look,
keeping the person.
You cannot deny it. You cannot say that, oh, that's political. This is exactly what secularism is.
Secularism is keeping your beliefs to yourself and allowing other people to follow their beliefs and creating a society which is an equal playing field for all, regardless of all differences.
Exactly. You've reiterated what I said.
Can I just also say very proudly that we own Rishi Sunak as our new Prime Minister. And that is an example of secular society in England because, you know, Rishi is a devout Hindu. He doesn't leave his house without a puja and all the rest of, you know, what they do.
He carries a little Ganesha with him.
And yet, he is the Prime Minister. And, you know, he will be working for the British public. And he will not be promoting only Hindu interests. Or Sadiq doesn't promote only Muslim interests. They work for the general public, which is made up of all types of people. And they want to make sure. And I'm going to tell you a little story about Sherry Booth. When her husband, Tony Blair, was Prime Minister. Sherry Booth got on the train without a ticket. And she was stopped by an inspector. And when she couldn't produce her ticket, because her credit card didn't work, she said, I'll pay at the other side. He said, no, you will pay a fine to me right now. She paid that fine to him. This is the Prime Minister's wife who was fined, and this inspector didn't lose his job. He wasn't disciplined or anything, because Sherry Booth herself wants to live in a society where the law is bigger than her. We all need to live in societies where the law is bigger than us, which applies to all of us equally, regardless of our color, our gender, our sexual orientation and everything. That's what we need to be. We need to live in a society where the law rules, not personalities, not people, not a particular majority. And you know, England is primarily, there are only 3% immigrants there. It's primarily a white Christian country. And look, they've got a mayor who's a Muslim. They've got another Bengali mayor in Tower Hamlets. They've got a prime minister. They've got a home secretary who's an Indian woman. And you've been talking a lot about oppressed women. But you know one thing? She's not doing anything for women at all. And I've written a whole chapter. I've written a whole chapter in my book about matriarchy. We go on so much about equality for women. Let me tell you, when women get into positions of power, they are no different to men. And what we need to do is change that mindset of when people get into power. Thatcher took away milk from little children. She was called Thatcher the milk snatcher. That's what we want to change. That attitude, when people get to that place. Preeti is loathed as a Home Secretary in England. And I can say this because we have freedom of speech in England. I can say that. But we have all these people. You've also got Kamala in America. So progress is being made in societies which keep their personal beliefs to themselves and want to have a society which is an equal playing field. I'm sorry, you want to ask a question?
मैं भी यही ऐड करना चाह रहा था. हुमा साहिबा ने जो बात की कि ख़वातीन को हर चीज़ जो वो पहनना चाहें वैसा पहनने की आज़ादी होनी चाहिए. अगर कोई स्कार्फ करना चाहती है, कोई स्कर्ट पहनना चाहती है, उसको आज़ादी होनी चाहिए. और इस माइंड सेट को हुद भाई कह रहे थे कि ये एक वेस्टर्न या मॉडर्न माइंड के बाद ही आता है. यहाँ पाकिस्तान हिंदुस्तान में इट्स टोटली डिफरेंट. आप इंग्लैंड सोसाइटी में रहती होंगी. पाकिस्तान में हम लोग ये कहते हैं कि आप जो कहना चाहते हैं आपने कह दिया, उसका मतलब हम बताएंगे. आप जो पहनना चाहते हैं वो हम बताएंगे. यहाँ पर कोई भी आज़ाद नहीं है. आप तो ख़वातीन की बात करिए कि ख़वातीन को पहनने की आज़ादी, या मुझे भी पहनने की आज़ादी नहीं है. यहाँ मुझे बताया जाता है कि तुमने वो बिलीफ रखना है जो हम बताएंगे. और अगर मैं डिफ़र करूँगा, हुद भाई को तो माशाल्लाह से अंदाज़ा है मजहबी तबके का बड़े मुखालफत रही है. तो यहाँ पर इस सोसाइटी में जो आपने एंड पे बात की ना कि हमें वो माइंडसेट चेंज करना है कि ताकत का, जिसके पास भी ताकत आएगी वो अपना रूल चलाएगा, उसके पास अपना वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर होगा. सिर्फ पाकिस्तान की बात नहीं है. अगर इंडिया भी हो तो वहाँ भी मुसलमानों को गाय खाने की इजाज़त नहीं होती. अब इसका किसी ये सिर्फ एक कल्चर और उस मुल्क के साथ है, हिंदू के साथ है, वरना इसका उनकी मॉडर्निज़म से या उनके सेकुलरिज्म से कोई ताल्लुक़ नहीं बनता. इवन ये कि इंडिया सबसे बड़ी जमहूरियत का दावेदार है और लिबरल और सेकुलरिज्म का दावेदार है, लेकिन पिछले 10 साल में जब से मोदी गवर्नमेंट आई है तब से ये जो फ्री विल है वो सबकी ख़त्म हो चुकी है. जिसके पास ताकत है वो अपनी रूल चलाएगा. तो मैं आप दोनों को सेकंड करूंगा, लेकिन पाकिस्तान, हिंदुस्तान, बांग्लादेश और अफ़गानिस्तान, ये जो माइंडसेट है ना, इसमें आप उस लेवल तक नहीं जा सकते. आई डोंट सी इन नेक्स्ट 100 और 200 ईयर्स कि हम इतने लिबरेट हो सकें या आवाम को कर सकें कि यार लीव हिम अलोन, लेट हिम डू वट एवर ही हैज़ टू और वट ही हैज़ वांट्स टू. तो हम लोग इतने काबिल नहीं हैं. हाँ, इस नहज पे मेहनत होनी चाहिए. हम लोग वेस्टर्न कल्चर को यहाँ इम्प्लीमेंट करने की सोच भी नहीं सकते. आप औरतों को तो छोड़ें, मर्दों के लिए भी बहुत बड़ी मुश्किल है.
मैंने कहा था कि ये जो कुछ मुल्क हैं इनको अभी और बहुत सारी स्ट्रगल्स को ठीक करना है, इससे पहले कि आप एक फोकस तरीके से औरतों की या बच्चों की बात करें. मेरा ये ख्याल है कि बच्चों का हाल इस मुल्क में औरतों से भी ज़्यादा ख़राब है. यानी इंग्लैंड में हम सोच भी नहीं सकते कि हमें सड़क पे एक बच्चा नज़र आएगा जो गाड़ी साफ़ कर रहा होगा ना, सोशल सर्विसेज फ़ौरन उसे अपनी केयर में ले लें अगर ऐसा हो. तो यहाँ पे तो बच्चों का तो बिल्कुल ही बुरा हाल है. फॉरगेट वुमेन,
जो भी कमज़ोर होगा, बच्चा हो या बूढ़ा हो, बच्चों से ज़्यादती भी इसी वजह से हो जाती है. बच्चियों से जो है ना, बच्चों से ज़्यादती से, क्योंकि वो अपना डिफेंस नहीं कर सकते. अगर एक ग्रोन वुमन हो तो उसको रेप करना बहुत मुश्किल है. वो सेल्फ डिफेंस भी करेगी, वो आपका मुंह नोच लेगी اور وہ کپڑے پھاڑ دے گی. لیکن اگر کوئی بچہ ہے 6 8 سال 10 سال کی بچی ہے,
جی
اول تو اس کو پتہ ہی نہیں ہوتا میرے ساتھ کیا ہو رہا ہے, کانسیپٹ ہی نہیں ہے, اور پھر وہ ریٹیلیٹ یا وہ ڈیفینس لیس ہوتا ہے, وہ کمزور ہے. تو اس وجہ سے بھی پاکستان میں بچوں کے ساتھ زیادتی بھی, اور جو بھی کمزور ہوگا, بوڑھے بہت زیادہ خراب حالت میں آپ کو ہر چوک
جو
چوراہے
بھی
پہ.
vulnerable لوگ.
ہاں, تو جو جتنا کمزور ہے وہ اتنا زیادہ خراب
جی
ہے.
جی
تو اس سوسائٹی کو یہاں پر بہت مشکل سے رکھا جا سکتا ہے.
I accept, and I think you've made me realize that my book is probably only relevant for South Asians abroad, not in their home countries. But I still feel all of you can go home today and say I love you to everybody you love at home. All of you can do that. I believe اس کے لیے آپ کو ویسٹ میں ہونے کی ضرورت نہیں ہے. And that's what
Actually, she was supposed to be here. She's not here yet.
ورنہ ہم اسی وقت کہلواتے آپ سے سب کے سامنے, سب کو حاضر و ناظر جان کے ہم آپ سے کہلواتے. But I hope this is being recorded and
Irshad.
watch it, but you can tell her. Nailed him on this.
ہما, میں نے کچھ عرصے پہلے کچھ سٹیٹس پڑھے تھے جس میں یہ تھا کہ یو کے میں جو ڈائیورس ریشو ہے وہ ایشین کمیونٹی میں پاکستانیوں کی سب سے ہائی ہے, پھر بنگالیز ہیں, پھر انڈینز ہیں, اس طرح سے کچھ. اب وہاں پہ فائنینشیل اس طرح آپ کو پریشر نہیں ہے جس طرح کہ ریسٹ پارٹ آف دا کنٹری میں, جیسے پاکستان کے اندر ہے, آپ کہہ سکتے ہیں. کیا وجہ ہے کہ وہاں پہ آپ کیا دیکھتی ہیں کہ اسپیشلی ایشین کمیونٹیز میں اور پاکستانیز میں وہ کیا ریزن ہے کہ جو ڈائیورسز ہیں وہ اتنا ہائی ریشو جا رہی ہے وہاں پہ؟
ایک تو اس کا سب سے بڑا جو ریزن ہے وہ یہی ہے کہ وہ بہت زیادہ کراس دی اٹلانٹک شادیاں ہو رہی ہیں. تو دیکھیں جو انگلینڈ میں بچے رہتے ہیں نا, ان کا مائنڈ سیٹ بالکل ڈفرینٹ ہوتا ہے, اور یہاں کے جو بچے ہیں, اور میں آپ کو بتاؤں, میں نے یہاں کے جو ینگ لوگ دیکھے ہیں وہ کبھی کبھی زیادہ پروگریسو ہوتے ہیں انگلینڈ میں رہنے والی ایشیائی کمیونٹی. بیکاز یو ہیو ٹو ریممبر کہ انگلینڈ میں جو پیرنٹس گئے تھے 60s اور 70s میں نا, ان کی وہی مینٹالٹی وہی تھاٹ ہے, انہوں نے وہی رکھی ہے وہاں, کیونکہ باہر انگلینڈ ہوتا ہے اندر پاکستان ہوتا ہے. تو میں جب پاکستان آتی ہوں تو میں دیکھتی ہوں یہاں کے جو ینگ لوگ ہیں نا وہ زیادہ پروگریسو تھاٹ رکھتے ہیں انگلینڈ کے. تو ایک تو یہ بہت بڑا مسئلہ ہے کہ یہاں کے بچے جب وہاں جاتے ہیں شادیاں ہو کے تو ان کی انڈرسٹینڈنگ نہیں ہو پاتی. دوسرے یہ ایک وجہ ہے کہ وہاں پہ جو فیملیز ہیں وہ یہاں سے جب ایک شادی کر کے لڑکا یا لڑکی لے جاتے ہیں تو وہ اپنی طرف سے ایک سلیو لے جا رہے ہوتے ہیں, اور وہ ان کی صحیح کیئر نہیں کرتے. ایونچولی ہوتا ہی, اور وہ بہت سے لوگ تو برداشت کرتے رہتے ہیں, ایونچولی سوشل سروسز گیٹ انوالو, کیونکہ بچہ اسکول میں جا کے بتاتا ہے میرے باپ نے رات کو میری ماں کو مارا تھا, پھر وہ بچے کی کیئر کی بات, تو وہ پھر بات باہر آ جاتی ہے, پھر وہ عورتوں کو ریفیوج میں لے جاتے ہیں. تو ایک تو یہ وجہ ہے, اور بھی 2-3 وجوہات ہیں جو پرویز جس طرح کہہ رہے ہیں, سوسائٹی پولیٹیکل. پاکستانی سوسائٹی میں ایک بہت بڑا مسئلہ یہ ہے کہ اگر پاکستانی سوسائٹی میں آپ کے بیٹے اگر ہومو سیکچول ہیں تو آپ کبھی اس چیز کو ایکنالج نہیں کرتے, نہ ایکسیپٹ کرتے ہیں, اور آپ یہ کہتے ہیں کہ شادی ہو جائے گی تو ٹھیک ہو جائے گا. اس چکر میں بہت ساری شادیاں ہوتی ہیں جو پھر بریک ہوتی ہیں, کیونکہ بیکاز یو نو اٹ ڈزنٹ میک اینی ڈفرینس. سو دس از ون ریزن. اور یو نو لوگوں کی بیٹیوں کی زندگیاں بہت سے لوگ جو ہیں وہ بالکل تباہ کر دیتے ہیں اس چکر میں, یہ ایک وجہ ہوتی ہے. دوسری ایک وجہ یہ ہے کہ وہی جو رولز ہیں کہ یہ فیمیل رول ہے, یہ میل رول ہے. اب دیکھیں, اگر ایک عورت گھر میں ہے اور وہ گھر کو چلا رہی ہے اور آدمی باہر چلا رہا ہے تو اٹ ورکس آؤٹ ویری ویل, بیکاز بوتھ پلے این ایکول رول which they want to. A lot of women want to be at home and be homemakers, which works out very well. اب انگلینڈ میں مسئلہ خاص طور پہ because I live in England, وہاں بہت مہنگائی ہے. ایک تو یہ ہے کہ وہاں سب کو منیمم ویج ملتی ہے, you cannot exploit anybody, so there are a lot of taxes, it's very very expensive to live in London. تو مرد عورت دونوں کو کام کرنا پڑتا ہے. جب عورتیں سارا دن باہر کام کرتی ہیں اور جب وہ اپنے گھر جاتی ہیں تو انہیں وہ بھی سارے کام کرنے پڑتے ہیں جو ان کو عورتوں کو کرنے پڑتے ہیں, مردوں کو. اور یہ مردوں کا قصور نہیں ہے. اگین وی لیبل اینڈ وی جج پیپل. The problem is the man has not been taught since childhood by his mother that one day you might have to cook roti and cook salan and clean the house and you know you have to. اب جو جنریشن انگلینڈ میں پیدا ہوئی ہے لڑکوں کی پاکستانی, they are very different. They are all trained to do all the housework. ان کی ماؤں نے ان کو, جو میری جنریشن کی عورتیں جب مائیں بنی ہیں تو ہم نے اپنے لڑکے لڑکیوں کی ایک جیسی پرورش کی ہے. So they do everything. کام بھی کرتے ہیں, گھر کا کام بھی کرتے ہیں. لیکن ایک پرٹیکولر جنریشن, پچھلی جنریشن تک یہ تھا کہ پھر وہ عورتیں بریک ڈاؤنز ہو جاتے ہیں ان کے. They can't do everything. کام بھی کریں, پیسہ بھی لا کے ڈالیں بجٹ میں, اور پھر وہ گھر کا بھی سارا کام کریں. So this is.
ہمیں آپ کی اجازت سے ایک بات کہہ سکتی ہوں.
جی ضرور.
آپ نے یہ सवाल पूछा है अबाउट डिवोर्स, तो जाहिर है कि आप इसको एक बहुत बुरी बात सोच के बात कर रहे हैं कि जो डिवोर्स है उसका ज़्यादा होना हमारी सोसाइटी के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा डैमेजिंग है, रिलेशनशिप्स के लिए। लेकिन आपने, मैं ये नहीं कह रही हूँ कि डिवोर्स बहुत बेहतरीन चीज़ है, लेकिन इसे थोड़ी सी गहराई के साथ सोचें तो आप देखेंगे कि जितनी भी कोई कंट्री प्रोग्रेसिव है और आगे बढ़ चुकी है, उतना ही वहाँ डिवोर्स रेट ज़्यादा है। एंड दिस इज़ नॉट अ नेगेटिव इंडिकेटर इन एवरी केस, क्योंकि जो हमारी नानी दादियों के वक्त का समाज था वहाँ डिवोर्स रेट बहुत कम था। क्यों कम था? क्योंकि चॉइस ही नहीं थी। ना तो औरत को चॉइस थी, उसको तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं थी, लेकिन जो सोशल प्रेशर था वो मर्द को भी ज़्यादा इस तरह की चॉइस को अच्छा नहीं समझा जाता था। तो यहाँ भी आपकी जो एक फ्रीडम है कि आप अगर अपनी ज़िंदगी का रास्ता बदलना चाहते हैं तो उसमें इतना बुरा कुछ नहीं है। और ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि अगर आपने अलहदा होना है तो आप मारपीट करके या गाली गलौज करके ही अलग होंगे। आजकल बहुत से लोग हैं जो बहुत दोस्ती से अलग होते हैं, एंड आई थिंक कि दैट इज़ a stage of evolution in society, in fact.
Very
Okay,
respectfully, although you are right up to a certain point, but very respectfully, I actually disagree with you on that divorce point. I don't think any man or woman actually want to divorce until it comes to a point when they can take it no longer. But the real victims of divorce are not the two people who divorce, it's the children. And I'm telling you this not only from my professional experience, but also from my personal experience, because I am a child of divorced parents. And I can tell you that it still affects me. It still affects me that my parents were always fighting when I was growing up as a child. It is something you never get over. It's the children that we have to think about. And I have been in a very stable marriage for 30 years, but a lot of the credit for that goes to my husband rather than me, because I have actually I have acted in terrible ways, because that's what I learned from my parents. It's learned behavior. And I have behaved terribly in my marriage, but my husband has contained me because he understood. Because I was very defensive, because my parents were always attacking each other, and I was taking it personally. I have written that in my preface, that I am talking from a very personal point of view. Divorce is a terrible thing for children, because they want their mother and father both. Now, if there's a lot of violence in a marriage, it is better for the children that they live with one parent in a peaceful environment, but they never forget. And the worst thing that mothers and fathers do to their children is to fill them up with hatred against the other parent. Children should be able to love both parents even after they have separated and divorced. But I don't think divorce is a good thing. And what we need to do is work on prevention. You know, rather than saying these solutions are okay, we should try and make sure that people enter marriages in an informed manner. You know, that they
Huma,
know what they're getting into.
Huma, I think that's really impossible.
It is, I agree. But we have to work towards it.
Divorce,
Everything
no,
is
you
impossible.
You cannot work towards it. It's something that will happen between two individuals, and the divorce, as Ranjit was saying, can be peaceful. It can be one where after a little time passes, the partners reconcile with each other. Still, they may be married separately, one here, the other there, and the children can come to terms with it, and there are countless examples of that.
But
So
I think
therefore, it is not a tragedy in the way that you are saying.
But you know, I'm talking from my experience.
So these are very personalized experiences.
No. I'm talking about my experience as a family lawyer. The children really suffer. I've got cases where parents have been battling for 5 years to meet their child.
But there are countless cases where they don't go to lawyers because they have no need to go
Yes,
to
but
lawyers.
that really-
So you don't get to see those cases.
You see, but they're the very refined, very educated, very rich people generally who tend to
maybe.
reconcile. They decide how the money
We
is
have
going
no
to be
data on
divided.
that. So we are running out of time. If there is any one last question or comment, otherwise, okay. This will be the very last comment or question.
आपने बात की कि वहाँ पे ज़ाहिर है कि इंग्लैंड में यही असूल माना जाता है कि औरत या कोई भी फ़र्द जो पहनना चाहे वो पहन ले,
जी
ठीक है। और हमारे, मैं सिर्फ आपसे ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि क्या वहाँ जब एक औरत कहती है, लीगल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से मैं आपसे बात कर रहा हूँ, वो कहती है कि मैं ये बुर्का, ये हिजाब या जो भी एक टिपिकल हमारा कंजर्वेटिव लिबास जो है, ये मेरी चॉइस है, तो क्या आप मान लेती हैं कि इट्स ओके फाइन, ये तुम्हारी चॉइस है? और क्या सचमुच ये ऑनेस्टली उसकी अपनी चॉइस होती है?
देखिए, इंग्लैंड में ये है कि वी डोंट गो बिहाइंड व्हाट पीपल वांट टू डू, वरना तो हम एक मॉरल पुलिस बन जाए ना। अगर हम ये कहें कि ये क्यों पहनना चाहती है और हम उस पर एक डिबेट शुरू कर दें, these are debates that need to be carried out within the particular racial group or the particular religious group. ये जो आप बात कर रहे हैं कि whether it's her own choice or whether she's been put in that place, what we have to look at is there are women who want to go to work with a hijab on. They travel on the trains, they travel on the tubes, and we want to make society safe for them. We couldn't care less why they're doing it. We just want to make sure that they don't get attacked for doing it. And that's why we give them the same right by law, and when I say we, I mean the lawmakers in England, give them the same right as women who want to go in a miniskirt. We don't want a woman in a miniskirt to get attacked by anybody, but we don't ask her why she wears a miniskirt. Why should we ask any woman why she wears what she wears? As lawmakers, our duty is to make sure that society is safe for everybody to travel, dress the way they want to dress. Now, if you think there are other gender issues and so on, well, then that has to be debated within that group. And it has to come from the women. We can't bring it out in them. If women want to, like for example in Iran, women have brought this out. So it's when the women raise it as an issue. If women, at one point in England, it had become so bad that women and men started sitting separately in universities. And a lot of women objected to that, so they went and complained. And then the universities immediately made sure that that kind of segregation doesn't happen on their grounds. But if the women themselves choose to sit separately, then the university or society in England can't, there's a lot of personal freedoms and personal choices in England. That's where this same-sex marriage has come from, because we believe people should have personal choices and they should be able to live the way they want. We are not going to judge them for what they're doing. It is the same thing, and it actually goes further. We cannot decide which God somebody should be praying to. People have to decide that. So the society is very neutral on these points, so on why people dress the way they dress, why they go to particular places to worship. We are neutral. We just want to make sure that it's all safe and they don't get attacked. That's the reason. I don't know if I've answered your question or not.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of this session. It's been a remarkably stimulating one. It has gone well. Your book was the center point around which all the discussions revolved, but it went beyond that, raised questions which are in everybody's minds now. And I'm very grateful that you did come to the Black Hole, that you gave this stimulating presentation, agreed to take difficult questions and answered them with great grace. Thank you.
I'm honored. It's really my privilege to be sitting here with you and doing this. It really is.
Thank you very much.
And I'm very grateful to
Thank you.
invite me.
Thank you.